Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Gene Curl, and if you have been with me for a while, you know that I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult. Today I wanted to talk about a bit about what it was like growing up in a cult. My father was a small-time cult leader with big aspirations. He wanted a large following like Jim Jones, but was unable to garner much support or to keep a congregation for long, as he was so rude and disrespectful to people that he constantly offended them to the point where they would stop following him. And he had a hard time recruiting new followers as well for that reason. My father always said that he could be like Jim Jones if he wanted to be. And later, after the Branch Davidian standoff, he said he could be like Jim Jones or David Koresh if he wanted to be. I never understood why my father would want to be like either of those horrible men, but especially Jim Jones. Still, the evidence strongly suggested that my father could not amass that kind of following regardless of what he claimed. Father called his church worldwide revivals, even though he never had a congregation or a following or a presence outside the contiguous United States. In fact, I never remember a time when the congregation was larger than 20 people. Because the congregation size was always so small, we could not rely on money from the church to survive and had to work other jobs. My father, however, was lazy and refused to work unless he absolutely had to, and it was mostly my mother bringing in money until I got old enough to work. Things were always tight growing up, and Father said it was because God chastises those he loves, but I thought it was simply because Father refused to get a real job. My father was either insane or made up all kinds of things, or both. He claimed to be the greatest prophet to ever live, even greater than Moses, and said he was just under Jesus Christ in importance. Father said he would be the great general in charge of legions of heavenly hosts as they were destroying the wicked from the earth. And he said he would stand on a hill and laugh as burning human flesh flew past his head. According to my father, he was the man in Revelations riding the pale white horse, whose name was Death. Father always talked about the end of days and how great it would be for him and how much he would enjoy destroying the wicked. If that doesn't paint a picture of what kind of man my father was, I don't know what will. The end of the world was always just around the corner, and almost everything from earthquakes to local wars were signs of the end of the times, an indication that the end was near. Father was also one of those people who prepared for the end of the world by stockpiling guns and supplies, but I never understood that. If he was to be in charge of the heavenly host, whatever would he need a gun for? Father also claimed that he would literally never die because he was so righteous, but since he has been dead for around 20 years, we can easily test the validity of that specific claim, and I gave all of his other faith claims the same weight. Father said the only reason people die is because they were not righteous enough, and that he was more righteous than any of the people in the Bible other than Jesus. According to Father, if a person died, it was only because of sin in his or her life, and that a sinless life would make one immortal. Father claimed that Jesus Christ himself came to visit him one day, embraced him in a hug, told him that he was his beloved Son in whom he was well pleased. Father also claimed that the angels of heaven and the angels of hell were constantly fighting over him. Either my father had delusions of grandeur, or he made up wild lies, but I honestly think my father believed what he was saying, at least part of it, as crazy as it sounds. Nearly every day, Father would have something new that God supposedly told him, or he would have a vision to tell us about, and since it was all I ever knew, none of this seemed strange to me as a child, at least not when I was small. As I got older, I started to question my father's doctrines and claims, though not openly, as I knew my father's propensity for violence, and I knew how he felt about people doubting him. My siblings and I were homeschooled, and our interaction with people outside of the faith was limited, as Father was afraid that we would be influenced by the world. Father always said that we were to be in the world but not of the world. But if he had his way, we wouldn't even be in the world. We were taught reading and writing and basic math, but no science or social studies or anything else, so I have some pretty strong negative opinions about homeschooling. If I hadn't liked to read, I would have been totally unprepared for college, and even at that, I was behind on a lot of things that I should have known before enrolling. College was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. Father would have never wanted me to go to college, but he was in prison when I enrolled. I guess you can say that some of my father's crimes finally caught up with him. Practically everything, especially anything enjoyable, was viewed as a grievous sin, and we were expected to be unhappy all the time as a sign that we were living right with God. There were numerous occasions when Father would destroy all of our toys, books, games, and other possessions while making us watch. While playing, we also had to be careful not to appear too joyous or to participate in loud laughter, as that was a sign that our innocent play had crossed the line into sin, and we would be forced to stop whatever game we were playing. It was difficult to enjoy being a child under those circumstances. We were not allowed to celebrate holidays or birthdays, as it was a serious sin to do so. Father taught that all celebrations were of the devil, including the Christmas holiday. Gift giving wasn't even allowed, even if it wasn't associated with a holiday or birthday. Father was always right, even when he was clearly and demonstrably wrong, and no one was allowed to question him or challenge anything he said or did, as he was a man of God, so righteous it was impossible for him to sin, according to him. To be a self-proclaimed man of God, my father sinned more than any person I have ever known, but he always justified his horrific actions by either saying God told him to do it, or that we made him do it by our words or actions. Nothing was ever my father's fault, even when it was clearly his fault. The doctrine and rules were always changing, and that caused everyone to walk on eggshells. We never knew if we were doing something right, or we never knew if we were doing the right thing, even if it was something we were just told to do, as the rules often changed without warning, and we would be severely punished for not knowing and following the new rules, even though we had no way of knowing them. Sometimes it was a sin for women to wear dresses, and other times it was a sin for them to wear pants. Sometimes it was a sin to watch television, and other times it wasn't. Sometimes fishing was a noble pursuit, since the apostles did it, and at other times it was a vile sin. But regardless of the state of fishing, it was one of my favorite things in the world, and I always did it. What was a sin one day may be a commandment of God the next, and what was a commandment today may be a severe sin tomorrow. We all had constant whiplash from the sudden and often violent changes in direction. The one rule that was always constant was that Father was always right, regardless of what he said or did. Doubt was a grave sin, and that was not allowed under any circumstances. My father said that doubting him was the same as doubting God, and that a doubt would cause a person to burn in hell. Father loved to talk about how horrible hell will be, and he loved to talk about how much people will suffer there. Father loved to see people suffer, and he loved the thought of people suffering eternally in hell. He had a severe case of schadenfreude. On several occasions when I was a child, we would stop at an automobile accident, and instead of helping, Father would preach to the people that they were going to hell. One time, there was a person stuck in a car bleeding to death and clearly scared, but instead of offering a hand or doing something useful, Father told them that they were going to die, and that when they died, they would go to hell. I think the person lived, but I'm not sure, as the police made us leave when they showed up. As we left, Father yelled at the cops and told them that they were vipers of hell. When I was 12, I decided to read the Bible for myself to see if it said what my father said it did, and I read it cover to cover. After reading the Bible, I pointed out something my father taught that was contrary to the Bible, so he took my Bible away and said he didn't want me to read it because I was misinterpreting it. I was also punished for questioning my father's doctrine. My father smoked like a chimney and always smoked rolled-your-own cigarettes without filters, so he always had pieces of tobacco on his tongue, and as a result developed a constant habit of spitting to try to get the tobacco out of his mouth, even when nothing was there. Father claimed that he brought people back from the dead and healed the blind with cigarette in his mouth, and he claimed that Jesus would have smoked too if cigarettes hadn't been invented in his time. My father also never washed his hands and said it was a sin to wash your hands, though he expected other people to wash their hands before touching his food. I always washed my hands anyway, though, even though he said it was stupid and that it was a sin. According to my father, the government knew that he was the greatest prophet to ever live and wanted him dead, and was constantly making attempts at his life only to be thwarted by the power of God. When I was around 12, I made the mistake of saying to my father, "If the government wanted you dead, you'd be dead." Because of his beliefs that the government was after him, my father lived in a constant state of fear and caused the rest of us to live in a state of fear as well. Anytime the government would intervene in a cult or extremist group, Father would point it out and say that the government was always interfering in the work of God, and that we needed to pray that we were not next. We were on high alert during the Ruby Ridge standoff and the Branch Davidian standoff. When Operation Desert Storm started, it was a clear sign that the world was ending, and we started preparing for the end of the world hardcore. Father always said that Barry Goldwater was the Antichrist, until Bill Clinton ran for president, and then Bill Clinton was the Antichrist. When the younger Bush was elected, Father was forced to admit that Clinton was not the Antichrist after all, and he searched for a new one. Father always said that God gave him the name of the Antichrist, but that he forgot what the name was. I never understood how a person could forget something so important. I'm certain that if Father had lived long enough to see Barack Obama become president, he would have said that he was the Antichrist, but it is apparent he wasn't the Antichrist either. There have been so many supposed Antichrists in my life that I have lost count. As I alluded to before, my father was an extremely angry and violent man, and he subjected his family and followers to all sorts of abuse, from physical and verbal to starvation. As I mentioned earlier, Father eventually went to prison for some of his crimes, and there he died from a massive heart attack. I wasn't surprised when my father died, but it did cement in my mind that he was wrong about everything. While growing up, even though I logically knew my father was not a man of God and that practically everything he taught was wrong, I could not shake the thought of, what if I'm wrong? It is difficult to break free from brainwashing, especially when you have been subjected to it from birth. Even after my father died, and I had been free from his cult for years, I still had the occasional thought that I may be going to hell for doubting my father. Logically, I knew my father was wrong about everything, but the brainwashing was difficult to shake. I could talk about my upbringing all day, but I think this will suffice for today. If you have any questions or would like me to talk about a specific aspect of my childhood, feel free to comment down below. If you have watched this far, I would appreciate it if you would give this video a like. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.